Hello and welcome to this presentation. My name is Ahmed El Gody. I'm a senior lecturer in Media Communication Department at Arabiya University. Today I will talk about the US image in Arab media following the tripartite diplomatic normalization agreement. So on September 16th of 2020, US President Donald Trump hosted the signing ceremony for the diplomatic normalization agreement between the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Israel at the White House. The UAE is the third Arab country to declare normalization with Israel after Egypt in 1979 and Jordan in 1994. Bahrain is the fourth. They are, however, considered the first among the Arab Gulf countries. The agreement triggered a multitude of controversies and harvested massive media attention in the Arab region, especially TV network stations, vacillating between anger and support to the role of the United States. So the purpose of this study is to examine the US image in three pan-Arab news networks, Jazeera, Al Arabiya, and Al Araby. Using critical discourse analysis, I aimed at studying the different discourses, voices, actors, and themes while covering the US image following the signing of the peace accord. Throughout the last century, with the proliferation of global mass communication, there are mutual image misrepresentation between the United States and the Arab world. If we look at media portrayal of the United States in Arab governments and mainstream media, it has ranged between positive and neutral. The United States is portrayed as a friend, an economic superpower, a partner, and a collaborator in the global war on terror. One of the most positive moments was during the 1990s, where the US government enjoyed more support among Arab governments and Arab populations following the inauguration of the peace process and the US rule during the Second Gulf War between Iraq and Kuwait. This has slowly shifted with more support from Arab mainstream and government media and less popularity from opposition and independent media, who were critical to the role the United States is playing in the Arab world for supporting Arab dictatorship and as a producer to Arab negative stereotype around the globe. Arabs were mainly associated with violent religious radicalism and Islamic extremist militants, as discussed by Samai and Malmer in their study in 2017. Further, Arab independent and opposition media were critical of the US, depicting it as a new colonizer that firmly established its dominance in the Arab world, not looking at the Arab world as a partner, but as a supplier for more material to boost US economy. This is, of course, coupled with the traditional negative depiction of the United States as not a fair moderator or not a fair mediator in the peace process, as discussed by Al-Masri and Auter in 2019. Of course, 9/11 has deepened the negative image of the United States. George Bush's crusade in the region and his holy war in Iraq brought anti-US attitude from both Arab governments and Arab citizens. That has posed a major challenge for the US administration, facing a low public support in the Middle East, while at the same time increasing number of popular Arab TV networks portraying the ugly face of the American-led war in Iraq. A poll conducted by Zogby International that was commissioned by the Arab American Institute, released in 2006, found that the respondents in 5 Arab countries has worse opinion of the United States than they had few years earlier. US acceptance dropped from 62 to 9% in Saudi Arabia, from 72 to 4% in Egypt, from 57 to 1% in Morocco, from 76 to 1% in Jordan, and from 47 and 10% in Lebanon. A more recent report by the Pew Trust found that the US image remained abysmal in most Arab region. So this persistency of negative image poses a formidable challenge to the ability of the United States to engage the Arab region, casting a cloud of suspicion over US political, economic, and cultural initiatives in the region. Despite US efforts to develop its image, endorsing public diplomacy channels like Radio Sawa, like Al Hora Television, like NBC Network, like High Magazine, it did fail. Actually, it didn't brought a significant Arab sympathy or Arab support. I'm sorry, it didn't bring sympathy towards the US administration or support from Arab public towards US policies in the region. Serious efforts were actually conducted by the Obama administration to develop the image of the United States. Several visits were conducted to the Middle East addressing both Arab governments and civic societies, which was reflected in Arab media coverage. However, during the Arab Spring, the US image started to get distorted again due to the United States' shaky role during the Arab Spring, supporting some movements in Tunisia and in Egypt, but not in the Gulf states. The US deliberately overlooked human rights violations against protesters in Bahrain, Kuwait, and in Saudi Arabia. The last straw in this short honeymoon image was with the release of the WikiLeaks documents that incriminated the Obama administration for their role during the war in Libya and in Syria. During the Trump presidency, the negative image got deepened with Trump's views and tweets that were clearly discriminatory against the Arabs and Islam. His policies to stall the peace process, favoring Israel's policy to expand settlements, pressuring Palestinian Authority to accept a final resolution were highly critical both on the official and popular level. The moving of the US embassy to Jerusalem was just adding salt to injury. So, in short, the US image in the US image in the Middle East was distorted. So President Trump's movement to endorse this peace accord was seen as an ambiguous move. It didn't give much room for trust. And that was actually encouraged me to look at how the US was depicted or how the US image was depicted in Arab mainstream media. I looked at the sample of 1 month following the signing of the accord or following the announcement of the agreement in order to look at the US image in Arab media. Now moving into the analysis, 10 voices were found across the 3 TV stations. Extremist, liberal, official, religious, young, women, Nasrist, civil societies, Arab communities in the West, and business organization voices. The study found out that some voices in the Arab conversations are higher than others, discussing that these voices are larger in quantity. They were using stronger expressions in terms of judging the others. Some of these voices were actually screaming when they put efforts to exclude other voices. They scream so that no one would hear other voices. If we look at how the US was depicted across the 3 stations, we can see that Al Jazeera played a form of like a double identity. It was constructive or while covering the US role where it attacked other Arab counterparts. So in that sense, one can look at the Jazeera as a form of like a more conservative coverage. So it was constructive when it discussed the US role. It praised the US efforts, and in that sense, one can see that it was hiding its stance, feelings towards the agreement. It may mean that they support the agreement, but they don't want to show it publicly. On the other hand, they didn't want to go into the details except for broadcasting the official position and their support to the move. The decision was the decision not to discuss the issue extensively is most likely based on the official instruction, because discussing the issue on television programs would expose the popular rejection of any peace agreement with Israel. Moving to Bahrain and the UAE, Al Jazeera Arabic was attempting to steer up Arab public opinion since Qatar considers the UAE as a direct opponent, and the agreement presented an opportunity to mobilize public opinion against the UAE and Bahrain governments. So in its coverage, it framed the agreement as a betrayal to the Palestinians, labeling it as a fragile accord. If we move from Al Jazeera to Al Arabiya, we can see that Al Arabiya was totally supportive to the accord. It was praising the US role, and it defined the agreement as an achievement for the Trump administration. Many political analysts from the United States and Israel appeared on Al Arabiya television, praising the importance of the agreement to the Middle East region as a whole, seeing actually the agreement as an opportunity to promote the peace process. However, getting deeper into the corpus and into the language of Al Arabiya, one can see that Al Arabiya was actually more concerned with justification or justifying its stand. It was mainly interested in defending the UAE official stand and the official stand of and the official position of the UAE government, especially when it comes to the UAE-Palestinian relationship. So Al Arabiya defended its position in relation to Palestine. Several articles emphasized the Palestinian gain from the agreement, pointing out that some Israeli settlers and their political allies are disappointed with the signing of the agreement, as the UAE affirmed that the agreement depends on Israel fulfilling its pledge to abandon the annexation plans. Finally, Al Araby showed a significant opposition and criticism to the announced agreement. Several programs and news expressed resentment towards the agreement and labeling it in terms with terms such as a betrayal, a selling out to the Palestinian cause, and an assault to Arab nationalism. One opinion regarding Al Araby aggressive stand against the agreement goes back to the fact that the channel hosts several diaspora journalists who are affiliated to Islamist group and particularly to the Muslim Brotherhood. Looking at the different themes, moving to the different themes, there were three main themes: religious network, nationalist network, and liberal network. So generally, the radical Islamist voices are higher than the others. They are higher because they are larger in quantity. They use stronger expressions in terms of judging other voices, opinions, and ideas. They mainly wanted sort of like to own the platform and to exclude other voices. So they were mainly screaming. And that was mainly in Al Jazeera and in Al Araby channel. The nationalist network that was only present in Al Araby and to an extent also in Al Jazeera, they were the second largest articles who believe in reviving the Arab nationalism, concepts of pan-Arabism, pan-nationalism, Nasser's idea, socialist idea. So the nationalists see the common geography, common language, history as the base of Arab unity. So in relation to the United States, nationalists see the US as a threat to their very existence. The image of the United States to nationalists can be seen as a threat to political, cultural, and economic stand. Finally, the liberal networks includes Arab opposition parties as well as banned Arab political groups and organizations like Saudi Democratic Front Party, the Muslim Brotherhood, the diaspora and human rights groups who were deprived of the freedom of expression to approach masses in their homeland. They were also critical to the accord. So in relation to the US, they share a nationalist notion that the United States as a political, cultural, economic colonizers. However, they see current Arab regime rigidness and political stagnation as the main reason for American imperialism in the region. Indeed, the liberalist language is not violent against the US as the extremists and nationalists. Rather, they don't direct their blame towards the US, but their blame is mainly against Arab governments. So, as a conclusion, as mentioned earlier, the analysis showed, analyzing the three channels shows that the religious themes occupied the major bulk of the message voices or the content voices, especially on Al Araby channel. It was clear that these comments or these messages were a call to support the Palestinian cause based on religious ground. The nationalists see themselves as the true Arabs in terms of the political, economic, and cultural ideology. Al Araby channel again were present showing the US as an imperialist colonizer who want to control Arab cultural ideals and natural resources. They see the way to preserve Arab culture is through returning to Arab nationalistic and Nasserist ideas and to obtain Arab nation and Arab solidarity against American imperialism. Al Arabiya, Al Jazeera, on the other hand, played a more good cop, bad cop, where on one hand they supported the US and praised its official stand. They were critical towards the timing as well as towards the Emirati and Bahraini government for not taking the matter first with the citizens and just dealing with it on its own. Al Arabiya stick more to the protocol news. Thank you very much for your attention and thank you for your time. Have a nice day. Bye.